Can anyone remember? Correct. Okay. Okay, let's continue reading. The Chulavaga states that when Ananda recited the Sutta Pitaka, the Nikāyas had the same content as they do now, with the suttas arranged in the same sequence as they now appear in the Pali Canon. This narrative doubtlessly records past history through the lens of a later period. The agamas of the Buddhist schools, other than the Theravada, correspond to the four main Nikāyas. But they classify suttas differently and arrange their contents in a different order from the Pali Nikāyas. This suggests that if the Nikāya agama arrangement did arise at the first council, the council has not yet assigned sutta to their definitive places within this scheme. Alternatively, it is possible that this scheme arose at a later time. It could have arisen at some point after the first council, but before the Sangha split into different schools. If it arose during the age of sectarian divisions, it might have been introduced by one school and then been borrowed by others, so that the different schools will assign their texts to different places within the scheme. So this is more like talking about the order in the way the sutta appears. The contents are the same, but the order in the Nikāyas and the agamas could have been arranged differently, which suggests that in the first council, there's no order being assigned yet. Okay, next paragraph. Sister IQ, would you like to read?
While the Chulavaka's accounts of the first council may include legendary material mixed with historical fact, there seems no reason to doubt Ananda's role in the preservation of the discourses. As the Buddha's personal attendant, Ananda had learned the discourses from him and the other great disciples, kept him in mind and taught them to others. During the Buddha's life, he was praised for his retentive capacities and was appointed foremost of those who have learned much. Etagatnam bahusutanang. Few monks might have had memories that could equal Ananda's, but already during the Buddha's lifetime, individual monks must already have begun to specialize in particular texts. The standardization and simplification of the material would have facilitated memorization. Once the text became classified into the Nikāyas or agamas, the challenges of preserving and transmitting the textual heritage were solved by organizing the textual specialists into companies dedicated to specific collections. Different companies within the Sangha could thus focus on memorizing and interpreting different collections, and the community as a whole could avoid placing excessive demands on the memories of individual monks. It is in this way the teachings would continue to be transmitted for the next 300 or 400 years until they were finally committed to writing.
Thanks, Sister Aikim. Let's take a look at the footnotes 5. Okay, Sri Nyanyaponika had a great disciples of the Buddha, chapter 4. So this book, Great Disciples of the Buddha, talks about as the title said, the disciples of the Buddha, who is considered great. And so Venerable Ananda is one of them. There's Venerable Sariputra, there's Venerable Mahamoggallana. So if you're interested in why they are the great disciples, you can read that book, Great Disciples of the Buddha. For Venerable Ananda is foremost of those who have learned much. And Venerable Ananda is also praised for his retentive capacities and his memory. So the way the teaching was preserved, different, let's say, specialization of the Sangha, focus on memorizing and interpreting different collections. And it has been this way for the next 300 to 400 years until they were finally committed to writing. Let's take a look at footnotes number 6. In the Theravada tradition, the writing down of the canon occurred in Sri Lanka in the 1st century BCE. At that time, the monks, apprehensive that the orally preserved teachings might be lost, collectively inscribed the texts on palm leaves and bound these into volumes. The prototypes of books up to this point, while individual texts might have been written down by monks as aid to memory, officially recognized transcriptions of the teaching did not exist. On the writing down of the canon, okay, this is just the reference. See Adhikaram, Early History of Buddhism in Ceylon, and Malasekara, the Pali literature of Ceylon. It is possible that in India, canonical texts were written down even earlier than in Sri Lanka. That's a background information. Next paragraph. Okay, so, Brother Waken, would you like to read?
In the centuries following the Buddha's death, the Sangha became divided over disciplinary and doctrinal.
Sorry, I accidentally muted you.
It's fine. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay, let me just start over again. All right, thank you. In the centuries following the Buddha's death, the Sangha became divided over disciplinary and doctrinal issues until by the 3rd century after the Parinibbana, there were at least 18 schools of sectarian Buddhism. Each sect probably had its own collection of texts regarded more or less as canonical, though it is possible that several closely affiliated sects shared the same collection of authorized texts. While the different Buddhist schools may have organized their collections differently, and though their suttas show differences of detail, the individual suttas are often remarkably similar, sometimes almost identical, and the doctrines and practices they delineate are essentially the same. The doctrinal differences between the schools did not arise from the suttas themselves, but from the interpretations the textual specialists imposed upon them. Such differences hardened after the rival schools formalized their philosophical principles in treatises and commentaries expressive of their distinctive standpoints on doctrinal issues. So far as we can determine, the refined philosophical systems had only minimal impact on the original texts themselves, which the schools seemed disinclined to manipulate to suit their doctrinal agendas. Instead, by means of their commentaries, they endeavored to interpret the suttas in such a way as to draw out ideas that supported their own views. It is not unusual for such interpretations to appear defensive and contrived, apologetic against the words of the original texts themselves.
Thanks, Brother Waken. Okay, let's take a look again at this paragraph. Yeah, it is natural that after the Buddha's passing away, the Sangha became divided over the issues. And then it's divided into 18 schools of sectarian Buddhism. So each school has their own collection of texts. Okay, this is the important part. Though the suttas show differences of details, the individual suttas are often remarkably similar, sometimes almost identical. And the doctrines and the practices are essentially the same. Let's take a look at footnote number 7. Okay. This is the reference of the book, Teach Min Chow, and from Chong Mun Kiat. This line, the doctrinal differences between the schools did not arise from the suttas themselves, but from the interpretation the textual specialists imposed upon them. Okay, then this line, the one that I highlighted, by means of their commentaries, they endeavored to interpret the suttas in such a way as to draw ideas that supported their own views. This is talking about the commentaries. It is not unusual for such interpretations to appear defensive and contrived, apologetic against the words of the original texts themselves. Okay, any questions or comments so far? We have finished this section, the origin of the Nikāyas. If not, maybe we read a few more paragraphs about the Pali Canon. Sister Billy, would you like to read?
The Pali Canon. Sadly, the canonical collections belonging to most of the early mainstream Indian Buddhist schools were lost when Indian Buddhism was devastated by the Muslims that invaded northern India in the 11th and 12th centuries. These invasions effectively sounded the death knell for Buddhism in the land of its birth. Only one complete collection of texts belonging to one of the early Indian Buddhist schools managed to survive intact. This is the collection preserved in the language that we know as Pali. This collection belonged to the ancient Theravada school, which had been transplanted to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BCE, and thus managed to escape the havoc wrought upon Buddhism in the motherland. About the same time, the Theravada also spread to Southeast Asia, and in later centuries became dominant throughout the region.
Okay, thanks, Sister Billy. So there were periods where Indian Buddhism was invaded, devastated by Muslims. They invaded northern India, and then all these texts, most of these texts, were lost. Yeah, can you imagine probably how heavy the karma they created to make such a precious gems, the Dharma gems, lost. This invasion effectively sounded the death knell for Buddhism. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, knell is the sound of a bell. Luckily for us, one complete collection of texts belong to early schools managed to survive intact. This is what we call the Pali Canon, the collection preserved in the language that we know as Pali. This collection belonged to the ancient Theravada school, which had been transplanted to Sri Lanka, 3rd century BC, and managed to escape the invasion. Okay, let's read one more paragraph, maybe Sister Singhui, would you like to read?
The Pali Canon is the collection of texts the Theravada regards as the word of Buddha. Buddhavacana. The fact that the texts of this collection have survived as a single canon does not mean that they can all be dated from the same period. Nor does it mean that the text forming its most archaic nucleus.
Archaic.
Sorry?
Archaic.
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 Archaic. Thank you.
Yes.
Nucleus are necessarily more ancient than their counterparts from the other Buddhist schools, many of which have survived in Chinese or Tibetan translation as parts of entire canons or, in a few cases, as isolated texts in another Indian language. Nevertheless, the Pali Canon has a special importance for us, and that is so far at least 3 reasons.
Okay, thanks, Sister Sigri.
Buddha Vachana, just to correct that. Buddha Vachana, word of the Buddha. Vachana means the word. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at this word, archaic. Archaic here it says, very old or old-fashioned. No longer indefinitely used, but sometimes used to impart an old-fashioned flavor of an early period of art or culture, especially the 7th to 6th centuries BC in Greece. Okay. Okay, let's read one more paragraph before we end for today. Sister Shomi, would you like to read? You're muted.
The Pali Canon.
This paragraph.
Sorry. First, it is a complete collection, all belonging to a single school. Even though we can detect clear signs of historical development between different portions of the canon, this alignment with a single school gives the text a certain degree of uniformity. Among the texts stemming from the same period, we can even speak of a homogeneity of contents, a single flavor underlying the manifold expressions of the doctrine. This homogeneity is most evident in the 4 Nikāyas and the older parts of the 5th Nikāya, and gives us reason to believe that with these texts, allowing for the qualification expressed above, that they have counterparts in other extinct Buddhist schools. We have reached the most ancient stratum of Buddhist literature discoverable.
Okay, I think we can stop here before the second reason. Thanks, Sister Shomi, because this paragraph is actually pretty long until the second reason. Okay, I think we can. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just very quickly. So the Pali Canon has a special importance in terms of research and in terms for our own like Dhamma study and practice. And Bhikkhu Bodhi outlines 3 reasons for doing so. So the first one is it's because it all comes from the same school, which is the Theravada school. Okay, this one you can read and think about it. Another comment is just want to quickly comment on the context of what archaic nucleus means. It means like when scholars look into the text, right, the Sutta Pitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, and so on, there are certain suttas they identify as the most archaic nucleus. That means to say there's a core collection of texts that belongs to the most ancient layer, or the most early layer of text. That's the context of the archaic nucleus referred here. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Brother Wigan. Any other comments? Okay, well, yesterday Quite has this question about the BCE thing, just to show a diagram. I think this one is probably clearer to explain. Right now we are at this site, 2000. Okay, so, but what is there before 2000? This is what we call BCE, before Common Era, and sometimes also called BC, before Christ. So counting backwards from this middle point is everything BCE. So let's say 500 BCE, then this is 500 years before the current calendar system is formed. So when we say 500 BCE, so it's roughly 2,500 years ago. Okay, that's all for today. If no comments, let's do a dedication of merits. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了。普愿具将细修持，实是常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。Thanks everyone for participating and see you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.